Well, welcome back to our third panel, and why don't we take just a moment to feast our eyes here on this array of remarkable talent. One thing worth mentioning is just how valuable our time is when significant people in our community take time to be with us, and thank you, we appreciate it very much. And I could turn that around and say the same thing here. Everyone sitting in this room has immense value, so the minutes we're together are precious. They add up to a lot. I'd just like to quickly introduce the 6 panelists, and then we'll begin with a short personal question and then get into the meat of the matter. Fortunately, we have got a significant amount of time. And I'm going to dispel my own sense of panic that we may not have enough time. I think we'll have just the right amount to do what we need to do. So starting over to my right, David Zaslow, Rabbi, Interfaith Community. And next to him, Linda Schott, the president of Southern Oregon University. And then Sheila Clough, who's CEO of Asante, Ashland Community Hospital. Stephen Saslow, CEO and publisher of Rosebud Media. Deanne Everson, Executive Director of the United Way of Jackson County, and Amrita Ramanan, Director of Literary Development and Dramaturgy of Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So welcome all of you. And just a word about Saul. Where did Saul go? There he is. I just wanted to thank you for your presentation. Saul and I knew each other eons ago, I think, like 35 years ago up in Victoria. And we used to collaborate a little bit up there. It was so thrilling to see his name on the program and know he was coming up here. He's one of these tireless workers for peace who's been doing it, I think, probably since you were a teenager. And I think we should just give him another round of applause. All right, well, I'm going to pose the same question we did in the last panel. And for those of you who weren't here, you'll hear it for the first time. Because it's so important to connect personally before we get into the data of systemic matters, I'd like you each to just share very briefly your personal experience of being the flame of peace. We'll get into how you flow that in through your organizations and your professional work later. You have prepared comments. But I think the individuals in the room would love to hear an individual statement, something personal that relates to your relationship with peace. So David, if you could start us off, we'll just go down the line.
Sure, I'd be honored to. Did you have anything here? No? I'll speak a little louder. I think I'll start with a little anecdote. When the tragedy in Pittsburgh at the synagogue occurred last fall, it obviously shook up my congregation. The synagogue here, one of 3 synagogues in Ashland, we all shook up terribly. We put out an immediate call to our Interfaith.
This first thing is just your quick comment, and then next we'll get into the prepared one.
Communities.
Okay.
Please come and support us because many of our members were calling us saying, we're afraid to come to the synagogue now. And the first person to respond was the imam in the mosque in Talent. And he said, I'll be there. And so that evening at 7:30 in the evening, we had members of the Christian community, Native American community, and the imam who came and supported us. So it was a beautiful evening. Well, when the tragedy occurred in New Zealand, and the mosque was, it was murders in the mosque, immediately the imam got the same response from members of his mosque. People were afraid to come to the mosque anymore. And so he called up the Jewish community, and he said, would members of the Jewish community please come to our mosque and join us for Friday prayers?
Wow.
Because our people are scared to come. I'm telling you, this was however many months ago. But every Friday you can go to the mosque, and this is a traditional mosque. You can go to the mosque and you can count, and you'll see mostly Muslims people. You'll see a handful of Jewish people there every week to be in solidarity and to pray with our Muslim brothers and sisters. I don't think I can say anything.
That was a beautiful story. Thank you. So, some of you know, I grew up on a ranch in what's called the Texas Hill Country. And many people hear that and they think, wow, what a wonderful early life you had. And I did significant dysfunction and abuse. And I think because of that early experience, I've spent much of my life trying to rid myself of that, the remnants of that violence that was committed against me. And when it came to raising my own family, I was very aware of the need to try to do that with as much love and grace and gentleness as I could. And I think that's carried over. I'll talk later, I'm sure, about education and my commitment to education. But one of the things I bring with me, or I try to, and I'm sure I don't always do this successfully, but I try to bring with me as a human being is an attitude of grace towards others. Sometimes when we're having conflicts at the university or in my family, I'll ask, what is that other person bringing to this? What do they really need to see and to feel like they're seen and they're heard? So it's, I think for me, on a personal level, it's practicing to get better at having that attitude of grace towards others in all of my encounters, going back to my early youth.
So being a flame of peace, interesting question. The thing that comes to me right away is that, I think Kelly said it before, is she goes to her values, joy. I go to my value and my core of service. I have a passion around service that is at the core of who I am and how I conduct myself in my personal and professional life. And I believe I continue to foster peace through that service, whether it be as a Rotarian and my work that I'm doing with the International Youth Exchange students and creating environments for them to continue to build relationships here in the United States and in countries across the world. I think it's with this core of service, I bring that into the professional life and healthcare and living out that passion and ensuring that people have access to those needed services within our community. That core of service brings me to collaboration. And multiple people on this table, even earlier today, have talked about collaboration. That service brings me to saying yes to collaborate to things, and whether it be with the university or the city or the different civic organizations within our community. I believe I can bring that flame by combining it with my passion around service.
Thank you.
I'm next.
You're next.
This is a little different. This is a story that has the added advantage of being true. I was township commissioner in Paradise Township, Pennsylvania, after I sold my company in 1998, and went to war with Sanofi Pasteur, a large chemical pharmaceutical company that produces most of our vaccines. And I look at things that I've been an advocate of, and when you look at peace, one of the big things that is derailing that happens to be pollution and climate control. As a matter of fact, one of the themes this year is that. So, short version of this is my commitment to things like this is to use the resources that I've been blessed to have to fight those things actively where others can't or won't. So here's the short version of the story. I'm township commissioner. We start getting reports of mercury in our streams. And I'm looking at these Department of Environmental Protection reports. And I don't know what they are. It's micrograms of overages, but yet they're violations. I find our township solicitor and say, what are these? He says, I don't know, same as you, but you better find out if they're sending them to you. It must be something of importance. So I find a gentleman by the name of John Childs. He happens to have been the attorney that took on the Rojas Sugar problems and the Exxon Valdez. He's an environmental attorney. And basically what he said to me in short was, Steve, let me explain this to you because you're not a scientist, which was the theme of everything that was said to me from hereafter. And that was, the severity of this is so bad that if a woman was pregnant and decided to pull her car off the road and wade in the water, chances are that child would become deformed. And I said, that's pretty serious stuff. So he helps me to get together a group of scientists, invertebrates, vertebrates, aquifers. I became very knowledgeable on all this. And we go to Sanofi Pasteur, and we very nicely say to them, here's the problem we have. The thimerosal, the mercury that you're using to create these vaccines, you're putting that effluent directly into our streams. And it's going downstream and it's going into the lake. I happen to have been a part owner of that lake, and we couldn't figure out why every year the blue heron would come. Now they're not there. We had brown trout, not there. The deer would come, not there. How come? Why is this happening? So we put all of these facts in front of them. We let all of the experts talk, and what I got was, you can't fight us. We're a multinational corporation. To which I looked at our attorney and I said, is a private citizen allowed to fund the fight of such an effort? And he said, absolutely. And I looked at the president of that division, and you'll pardon my language, and I said, you are so screwed. And so for the next year, we basically we solved the problem. We solved it peaceably, and we solved it without going to court. We solved it with the community understanding that even though there were jobs there and this company was threatening them, we'll just pull out. My response is, where are they going to go? New Jersey, with a moratorium on building anything like that stopped years ago. Or are they going to go back where they got kicked out in Pennsylvania? So don't listen to these threats. Where we ended up was on Christmas, right before Christmas, I called them. And I said, I ran a company the same size as your division. And I said, you know what's going to happen? They're going to call you and they're going to say, so, how's our project going in the Poconos? And you're going to tell them some story about this lowly township supervisor that stopped this down and got you into all kinds of problems and the like. They're going to say, wait a minute, you can't handle a lowly township supervisor? We're a public company. We demand return on investment. We're not a passbook savings account. I said, so my point in saying that to you is, do you know what I asked you to do? I asked you to put the equipment in that basically would convert all of these pollutants to something that you could cart off to a safe area. It cost you less, same amount of money, actually, a little bit less, but you would not have a problem that you are creating for the community. We resolved it. And cool. That stream right now is one of two, what they call cold water fisheries in the United States. You can't put anything in there in the way of effluent. I went a little overboard. Sorry. That's a commitment that I see to peace, the kind of thing that I want for my son and my fiance's children, who are my sons, to have.
Great. Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thank you. It's been a really remarkable day. My life is very simple. I've spent the last 20 plus years climbing down the corporate ladder on purpose. And I'm grateful for that. I was an economist for 17 years. But I've been a volunteer my whole life, so I think that's how I hold the flame for me, because it offers me great peace. And I have very gentle aspirations for my life, which are to have fun, which is really important, because it gives me joy. And to do good so other people do well.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I've had the privilege and the blessing to be able to meditate on this question, having heard all of the incredible responses that have been received through the day. And what came to me immediately was thinking about the cultural and religious context that I've been reared in. I'm the immigrant child of two parents who immigrated from southern India who are both practicing Hindus, so I practice Hinduism. And in Hinduism, fire is very sacred because it is believed to be the element that cannot be polluted. And I think of that in the context of what a personal flame and a flame can be. And it reminds me of the strength and resilience that flame can have, that it is carried when you think of the peace flame. And it also reminds me of how, in my personal frame, I constantly must honor my ancestors, those who came before me, and carry out their dreams. With that, I was raised in a family that loved the arts, but did not believe that they could actually be artists professionally because of the number of conditions that they were raised in, including third world poverty, including situations in their home life. And so as someone who gets to practice art every day and loves to practice art every day with the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, I continue to carry a flame that says, for anyone who believes that art can change lives, there is possibility. It has saved my life. And as my mother would say, that I have the gift of being able to take the risk that she could not. And so that is what I share to anyone who cares about the arts and believes in the transformation of arts.
Wow. So what strikes us is how different everybody is, right? It's like facets on a gem. And I was reminded of that phrase, who you are speaks so loudly I can't hear what you're saying. We love what we hear people saying, and as they're saying it, we sense who they are. So we've just met 6 individuals, and I'd like you now to give your prepared comments if you have them, or if you don't, just your focus on how you are experiencing what our theme is today, the flame of peace, being that, flowing it through your organizational work, the systemic impact and significance of peace for you in your work. So David, we can start with you again, and we'll go down.
Thank you. First of all, I want to let everybody know that people, because Zaslow and Saslow come from the same root. In Eastern Europe, a lot of people think I bought the Daily Tidings. I'm your new partner. I really want to make my remarks more anecdotal, if that's okay with you. I want to just continue on with these stories, because sometimes stories are just as important as principles. My son-in-law is an African-American professor in Richmond, Virginia, and my granddaughter, who's 9 years old, is being raised actively in the African-American and Black community in Richmond, very active in Black Lives Matter, and very active in her synagogue. So one of her African-American girlfriends, also 9 years old, said to her, so what are you more? Are you more Black or are you more Jewish? And my granddaughter, Amaya, said, well, I'm 100% Black and 100% Jewish. What was so fascinating is that, kind of without guile, only as a child could do, she wasn't buying into the binary, that she had to make a choice. Is she more for this or more for that? Is she more Black? Is she more Jewish? And I think that binary often is good for a debate, but it's not good for dialogical thinking where we all get along. I just want to give an anecdote here locally. Her grandchild, who was the former head of the Peace House, was creating a program on Israel. And I don't know if I was the first, but he certainly reached out to the Jewish community and had me and Rabbi Joshua Boniger, my colleague here in town, be part of it. It had nothing to do with whether we agreed or disagreed. We certainly had elements in terms of peace in the Middle East that we disagreed with. But the fact that he reached out to the Jewish community to be part of this day about Israel really said a lot to me about his nature of binary thinking. And I always look forward to his columns, Stephen, in the newspaper, in the tidings, because even when I disagree with him, his thoughtfulness is so carefully worded. You know, I envy the way he puts words down. And I want to say it's because it's non-binary, because it's nuanced. It's easy to separate us from them unless we see the nuance. And the nuance comes a little bit through joy. So a third anecdote. Imam Zaki, the imam of the mosque here, I was part of a panel on peace in the Middle East. It was supposed to be one Muslim and myself representing the Jewish community and taking the position of Israel. And it was supposed to be one Muslim and one Jewish person. And I got to the panel, and there were three Muslims and myself right in the middle. And one of the Muslims was from Iraq, one was from Afghanistan, one was from Egypt, and I was in the middle. And when it came to my turn to talk, I said, gee, I feel like Israel in the middle of the Middle East here. and Imam Zaki was sitting to my left. He said, yeah, but there's a difference because we're here to protect you and be with you. You know, it touched my heart because it had nothing to do with whether we agreed or disagreed about this policy or that policy. What it had to do with is that he was making a heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection. Heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection. And I can't speak highly of how important I believe it is to get out of the binary. The word Islam, the word shalom, it comes from the same root. Shalom, Islam, it means peace, but it doesn't mean peace in the English sense of it. Shalom in Hebrew means wholeness. Now get this. You say shalom, you say hello, you say shalom, you say goodbye. The two most opposite things, coming and going, you say the same word, hello, goodbye. Because they're interconnected. When I say hello, I know I'm going to say goodbye. When I say goodbye, I know there's going to be another hello. And that concept within the etymology, within the word of both shalom and Hebrew, Islam, same word, wholeness requires that we don't make peace with the people we already agree with. We make peace with the people we don't agree with. The people I need to make peace with are the people I don't want to make peace with. The people I need to make peace with and sit down with are the people I don't want to sit down with. That's what shalom is all about. It's not about who we agree with. It's about who we're going to sit down with. And we have to sit down with the ones we disagree with the most. It's true in battles within Judaism, within our own structures and our own problems. It's true with our interfaith work. We make peace with those we disagree with the most. And that's what wholeness is. Not coming to agreement, but agreement of the heart, agreement of the soul, and being together. So, with getting out of this binary is so difficult because our minds are sort of set with, well, if I'm for peace, then those guys over there are not for peace. But if you go over there, you might find that those guys also want peace, but just have a different way of approaching that peace that you may disagree with. I'll give you another anecdote. It was the Gulf War, first Gulf War. I was in Medford offering an invocation and prayer for the soldiers. Prayer for peace by praying for the soldiers that they wouldn't have to even engage with each other. And there was a young man who was the head of Southern Oregon Skinheads. And he came up to me after the speakers and after the talks, and he said, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm the head of the Southern Oregon Skinheads. Puts his hand out, I shook his hand, I'd never shaken the hand of the head of Southern Oregon Skinheads before. And he said, I just want to say thank you so much, I didn't know Jews liked America. So, it's sort of, you take it provocatively, but I really took it as, wow, this is really beautiful. I said, thank you so much. We Jews love America as much as Christians and Muslims and any other group loves America. And he was just sort of delighted to hear that. And then one of the members of our synagogue was an African-American woman. She didn't know who I was with. She just walked up to me. She puts her arm around me. So I said to him, I introduced them to each other, and he puts his hand out. He said, well, I've never shaken the hand of a black person before, but it's really an honor to meet you. It's an honor to be with you here today, and you can be my friend too.
Oh, cool.
I'm telling you, it was such a surreal moment for me. I found out 3 months ago, 3 months after that event, that little event of just politeness from the African-American friend of mine and myself to him, it shook him up to his core. He quit Southern Oregon Skinheads, And he started being an advocate for peace and relationships with each other in the world. And it wasn't because I was so wise and intelligent to shake his hand. It was almost accidental when he came up to me and said, I'm from the Southern Oregon Skinheads. I could have said what I wanted to say inside, something negative, but I put my hand out, he put his hand out. We don't know the little things that we do that reach the heart and soul. Sometimes it's not a letter to the editor. Sometimes it's not an argument. Sometimes it's not a debate. Sometimes it's just soul to soul, person to person, heart to heart.
Well, I'm going to start with a little bit more biography and then switch to talking about Southern Oregon University. I went to graduate school to become an historian, and I didn't know what kind of history exactly. But in my first year there, I had a feminist historian as one of my teachers, Estelle Friedman, and I quickly got turned on to women's history. And so that began to drive the rest of my time as a PhD student. And when it came time to select a dissertation, I was also interested in the history of ideas. And so I decided to look for a topic where I thought women and men in history had thought about it differently. And that brought me to the peace movement. So I ended up doing a dissertation on the women's involvement in the peace movement in the United States before World War I. And while I was doing that, I remember, really learning about the peace movement. This was 1982. This was during the women's encampments at Seneca Falls and Grenham Commons. And I was thinking, yeah, I like doing this scholarly work, but should I be an activist? I was talking with Dr. Yang earlier, and he was saying, yeah, I got my doctorate, but I was torn between did I want to go into academia or did I want to go into policy making? And I had a similar kind of struggle. I really kind of wanted to be an activist, but I loved education. And ultimately, I decided to stay in education, with the belief that, at least for me, that was where I could make my unique contribution. So I started teaching. I taught, all of you know me as the president of Southern Oregon University, but I taught for 25 years before I moved into administration. And I taught history, I taught women's studies, I taught American studies. And I dealt with issues of social justice, equality, of freedom, in all of those things. And I also experienced in the university unfair treatment and discrimination and bias. And so gradually I came to the realization that maybe it was time for a little activism in a different way. And if I wanted to have any power to change these things that I didn't like about the university, I needed to step up and try to get a seat at that table in some way. So I began moving into administration so that I could have the power to change some of those things that I did not like. So that led me then into administration and eventually into the presidency. And I try to keep that at the core. And I'm sure that you can ask any number of people at Southern Oregon University who would say, I fail at this every day. But I try to keep my eyes on the prize of a fair and just institution that values all its employees, that tries to empower its employees. I say repeatedly in campus events, we need every good brain. We need every person on this campus empowered to help us think about the solutions to move us forward. I was particularly drawn to Southern Oregon University for two things, and they became critical to our new strategic plan. One is the university's commitment to environmental sustainability. And I want to echo what Representative Marsh said earlier. I too believe this is an existential moment for this country and our world, and that we at the university need to do our piece to make sure that we are advancing the movement of environmental sustainability and educating the learners who come to us about the importance of that. The second thing that drew me to Southern Oregon University and that also became a critical part of our new strategic plan is a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And people will always sort of ask me, well, where did that come from? And it comes from who Ashland is, who SOU is. For me, it's very much about, one, it's the right way to be in the world, and that we need to recognize, again, the value of each human being and empower each human being to contribute to the best of their ability. It also happens to be pragmatic for the university. We know we have an increasingly diverse population, and we know that we need to do a better and better job of serving that diverse population. So those two things are really, really important to me and to the university. And I want to call out a couple of people in the audience. One is Senora Sheila, who is here with us, because you all know that Senora Sheila was the spark that got this wonderful international relationship between Ashland and Guanajuato and the University of Guanajuato and SOU going. Yes. It's been one of the great privileges of my presidency here to be able to travel down to Guanajuato twice, and especially in the context of the attitude that our federal national leaders have taken towards Mexico in the last couple of years. It's been wonderful to be able to go there and experience firsthand the citizen connection. And I think we are, in a sense, those of us who make those exchanges, the citizen peacemakers. And, you know, the first time I was there was in 2017, and Donald Trump was just announcing the change towards our DACA students being much less welcoming. And I was sort of in a little bit of a state of despair about that. And my colleagues there were like, you know, we in Mexico have learned how to work in spite of our national leaders at times. Now it's your turn. You just need to learn how to work in spite of your president. So that was sort of heartening. And the second people I'd like to call out is Barry and Catherine Baldwin. You know, you've already heard they've sponsored this, but Barry's on our board of trustees, as is Sheila. We're very proud of that. But Barry had a vision for this facility that would be a presence on our campus. And he brought this into being, and I'm amazed all the time by what that pavilion is drawing to our campus. And it brought the International Peace Flame. It's connected us to this gathering. It brings all sorts of people to that space. So could we just acknowledge Barry and Catherine? And finally, you know, sometimes bad things bring good things. A little over a year ago, I was dealing with a very difficult situation on campus that had to do with student behavior. And I cannot go into any details, but it was really tough, and we had dealt with it for months. And I just knew that the solutions that were being offered to me were not satisfactory. There was either too much punishment or it just didn't feel fair. So I just went out and started Googling. And I had heard of restorative justice, but I had not heard of it being applied in this particular circumstance. And in fact, I found great resources, and we brought that process to the campus, and we engaged in it with the individuals who were involved. And it was such a moving experience. So now we are beginning to bring that into our judicial processes on campus. And I'm really thrilled that we're going to move away from being quite so judgmental and punitive and more towards really what we're about, which is educating students and helping them transform their lives.
It's really tough to be as you go down the line. I would be remiss if I didn't start with a thank you. Particularly honored and appreciate the invitation to be here Irene and David, this is a milestone event. It's really one of those pinch me kind of moments. As I described this to my colleagues and my family, what I was going to do today and who I was going to be in the company of, it was a pinch me moment. Wow. We have an amazing group of people around this room today, and I am just humbled to be part of this. It really started with a conversation this summer in my office at the hospital. David came in and wanted to engage me in this conference, and it gave us an opportunity to have a dialogue around the work that he's doing, the work that we're doing at Asante, and I, of course, when I talk about the work that we're doing in healthcare, I get really excited, and I was sharing with him the journey that we've been on as a healthcare organization. Not only do we have the hospital here in Ashland, but we've got tertiary care hospital in Medford, one in Grants Pass, and then clinics across the region. And we went down the pathway of doing a community health needs assessment. And many healthcare organizations do that, as well as our insurers do that, our public health departments do that. And so we also went down the path of doing a community health needs assessment to understand what the needs are in terms of health for our communities. And then we did something unique for, that was, we came together as a community. And we put our heads together. We brought the civic organizations to the table, and we brought our public entities to the table, and we compared notes on what are the gaps in our health system and our health and well-being in this region. And from that exciting work and partnership, there was a recognition is that if we pooled our resources, time, energy, and treasures, we probably are going to do a better job of tackling some of these big social changes in our system that will help foster well-being for all of our citizens. So I'm gaining excitement as I'm telling him this, and I'm telling about the outcome of that was a community health improvement plan, and now we're starting our first year into that plan and what we are going to do as a health system to contribute to the overall good of our community along with our community partners. And I could see David's excitement growing in this. And I couldn't quite understand it until he said, "Do you know what you're doing is aligned with the United Nations?" No, I didn't. And so he fumbles through his papers and he comes out with this. This, Ambassador Schott probably knows what this is. I had a hand in it, I'm sure. Sustainable Development Goals. You spoke of it this morning. 12 of them. Focusing on everything from impacting poverty and hunger and climate change. Well, I, of course, being in healthcare, landed right on number 3. Number 3, let me read it to you. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. Ooh. That's where I sit. And as you read further in this document, it explains why the United Nations feels this is so important. It's important to foster well-being because it's directly linked to the prosperity of societies. I agree wholeheartedly. And I'm so humbled and thrilled and excited to really think about the work that we're doing here locally, not only through the health system I work for, but as partners in this community. The work we're doing locally is linked globally.
Right.
And we heard about that this morning, how important the global efforts are to to achieve those global efforts, it starts locally. And we're doing that right here in this community. One of the questions we were posed with as speakers was to think about how we use our leadership to promote peace and promote well-being for our community. Well, I've been blessed to be able to use my leadership and my passion around service in the communities that I live in to promote that well-being. Today I'm doing that both in my professional life and my personal life. Professionally with the Asante Health System and the collaborations we have around our Community Health Improvement Plan. But personally, I've also been engaged and had the honor of working with the Ashland Chamber of Commerce and lending my leadership to the Health and Wellbeing Initiative. In this community, we have local leaders coming together with a shared vision around fostering well-being. Notice I said well-being, not health. Because well-being is much more broader than health. Health is important and it's an aspect. But well-being takes into account the physical, the mental, the financial, the connection, the spiritual. And so this group that's working together in our community is focusing on impacting the well-being of our employees in our community with the knowledge that if we impact our employees, it will influence all those who live, work, and play in this great city. And I am thrilled by that work, and I can't wait to continue to lend my leadership, and I'm committed, along with I know many of my colleagues here and sitting next to me in the audience, I'm committed to making that happen in our community. Because if we can make that happen here, it links us to what can happen globally.
Right.
I'll move in so you don't have to move my microphone. We'll start in the same way and say thank you very much, David and Irene, for letting me and our company participate. And I hope this is, and you have my commitment, that we will do this with you for as long as you keep having these kinds of efforts. And hopefully it's more than once a year, as we've talked about. And I think it's very important. And hello to all of the dignitaries and all of the elected officials. Glad I got a chance to talk today. I wrote last week in the newspaper, and every once in a while I do that. Sometimes I get good response, and sometimes I think I'm pouring gasoline on the newspaper, but I wear my heart on my sleeve. And a lot of those things are expressed in music because it's part of the industry that I came out of. So one of the things that came to mind when I was asked, please participate, say something, what do you really feel about this? In 1974, there was a songwriter, he's still around, his name is Clough, and he produced and he performed with his band called Brinsley Schwartz, for those of you who are music enthusiasts, a track that in the United States was made famous by a fellow named Elvis Costello in the Attractions. It was called What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding.
Right.
And it was real powerful words because I got a chance to be part of interviewing him as what did you really mean by that, and got a sense of that. I'll just read a couple of lines. He says, and as I walked on through troubled times, my spirit gets so downhearted sometimes. Where are the strong? Who are the trusted? And where is the harmony, sweet harmony? So peace, sweet harmony, as the song describes, it's profound. And unless people like us sitting in this room are committed to actually articulate that challenge to gain peace, it's merely a convenient abstract that people say they want, but haven't a clue to what it really means. And in other words, I'm saying to you that I think that peace has become passive. Needs a bit of rehab. It takes work, it takes compromise, and it takes a good bit of pain along the way. I had mentioned in this article 3 people in 1968 where I woke up, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and even looked at the Chicago Democratic Convention. The whole world is watching. And other people along the way that gave their lives or their entire life changed because of their commitment to peace. So where I'm saying is that I think it begins by understanding as a basis that the only way that I think we live in harmony is when we see something in another person that we relate to. And in order to do that, you have to be pretty open-minded. And right now, that's not where we are as a nation. We've become softened as a nation, and we're not really ready for true peace. And we become less tolerant than ever before in accepting our differences. That has to change. The melting pot, as they used to call it when I was growing up, that used to be America, has given way to really caustic attitudes, really caustic speech, and worst of all, it's a lack of respect needed from each other to accept our differences. Troubles me. I'm wondering what I leave for my kid. So our job, and this is where everyone else is talking about the institution that they represent, our job as a newspaper, and probably one of the things that attracted me to do the insane thing of buy a newspaper and try to migrate it to a 21st century news and information source, is that we have to start with a commitment to foster peace. And I've said it in a lot of different ways. And every time I go and say it, I back off of it because it becomes completely controversial and misunderstood. So I think that I'm going to become a bit more vocal about that. And I think that in continuing for us to be a responsible news leader, it's not the things we don't do as a newspaper, as a news organization. It's the things that we do by example that make the difference. Like a couple years ago, we said clean air. And every day we kept the ticker up there. It said clean air. How many days where politicians are going to do things about it? Some of us may have liked it or not, but we went and kept a record of who's actually doing something about it. I'm not going to take credit for the wonderful summer, wish I could, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So I look at this and I'm saying here is the commitment and what I had said to the staff, the 40 people that I inherited from Gatehouse, who are now 110 and growing. I said, the thing that we're going to do here that's different, and the joke of the name Rosebud is you can't control anything. If you remember the film Citizen Kane, he thought he could make elections, people, issues, etc. You can't do that anymore. That's not bringing people together. That's pulling stuff apart. So the commitment I made to everybody was, this is going to be different if you've been here for a long time. Our commitment is that we're going to publish different and varied positions so that you can look and see different points of view from the point of view of understanding that if you know what somebody that thinks about things differently than you might get a chance to resolve that or at least understand where they're coming from. Otherwise, you just see red. That's what I see happening today. It's getting further and further apart. The second thing, and most importantly, and this is as a news organization, is we're accountable. We're maybe one of the few institutions in this valley that is accountable. We have got to publish things, and this has a lot to do with peace, to take bias off the table. So our commitment is our reporting is factual and unbiased, and without an agenda. I say that a lot, and I've gone through this speech many times. Actually, when I sat down, I talked about this 2 years ago. I made, where's Herb? He's around here somewhere. I stood up and talked about exactly this when I came here. First week in the community. And we're going to have unbiased reporting. We're going to try to tell the whole story or no story at all. And when we do editorials or opinion, we're going to try to gravitate to show all sides of this. And it's like, go Steve. That's great. Now the moment you publish something that someone disagrees with, the gloves come off. That's it. You are the worst person in humanity. So that's what I think we're doing, and that's our contribution to a lot of the change that has to happen. And this is a good place to make it happen. And I think next year, if you include Medford in this, we are one community. I know this because I watch it a lot. There's a term called the megalopolitan corridor. Now, we're not that advanced in terms of our population that we're going to be a corridor like between Baltimore and Washington. But you look at the growth between Ashland and Medford. That's where it is. This is one community. Draw it together. There's just as many people in Medford as interested in what you're talking about today as there are here. I can tell you that because they call me all the time. All the time. Mm-hmm. So I'll just end with just the rest of this line of this song, which is pretty meaningful. As I walk through this wicked world, searching for the light in the darkness of insanity, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain, hatred, and misery? And each time I feel like this inside, there's only one thing I want to know. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? The answer is nothing. It can be achieved, and it starts with our commitment here in very, very different ways. It's a lot of hard work, it's balance and reason, and it's fairness. Just what Linda was talking about. So, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David and Irene, and thanks for all those visits to my office. I really enjoyed them. They were bizarrely rambling conversations we put up with from me. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Ambassador, for your remarks. I especially loved when you said the absence of peace takes away our ability to better ourselves. I spend every day blessed with the fact that we all walk with a story, and people share theirs with me by virtue of my job as head of the United Way. And because of disruption at best or destruction at worst in people's lives, they definitely, many of them have the absence of peace in their lives, and it makes it very hard to better themselves. And many of those people become my friends. One of them is named John, and he just got the first job he's had in 17 years, and he's a paraplegic and lives for the most part in his power chair. And in the next couple of days, I have to borrow a scooter from someone and put a GoPro on a helmet and ride beside him to try to get to his job at Harry and David because they hired him, thank you, Harry and David. Because he can't really get from his apartment to his job because there's not a sidewalk all the way. And so he's probably going to have to take the Greenway at 10 o'clock at night, which is not a good choice for him. He was homeless for the last 17 years. And so it's not that it's not safe for him to be on the Greenway, but he'll be hanging out with people who are his friends, and that's not a good choice for him. So I'm going to try to find the places where he can't stay on the sidewalk. And Al Densmore and I, for those of you who know Al Densmore, we're going to try to solve that before he goes to work. Because riding that at 10 o'clock at night is not a good choice. But John's my friend now, and he knew I was going to be here today. So he sent me an email this morning that started and ended with shalom. So I love that. I believe that we are stewards of community in our time, however we call community and however we do that. United Way is about creating positive community change. And we do that focused on 4 areas: education, income, health, and transportation. We have goals around each of the 4 of those. I view my own job as sort of a challenger to share what's true in community. Which usually means I'm a cocktail party spoiler by going, hey, you know how many dropouts we really have? Or, you know how many people were arrested for domestic violence in your neighborhood? I share data and stories. Representative Marsh caught me in the hallway because she said, I worked so hard on that Student Success Act. Wasn't that great, and that juvenile crime stuff? And I said, yeah, that was great, but Ellie was sentenced on April 23rd. And Ellie is my friend. And she was sentenced to 25 years. No chance for early parole, no chance for early release. And she's 17 years old. And she conspired to kill her father when she was 15. And she was an honor student at South Medford High. And she played in the Youth Symphony of Southern Oregon. And she did conspire to kill her father. And it has taken me 6 months to almost be approved to be a visitor to see her at Oak Creek Juvenile Prison. And I don't have an arrest record, and I'm not very interesting as a human in my private life. And still, I haven't been approved to visit her in prison. But I'm almost there. I have one more hurdle, but I will go see her soon because she's become my friend. And weirdly, and potentially diametrically opposed to a lot of people in this room, prison's a good place for her. It's a whole lot safer and better and healthier than where she spent the first 17 years of her life. She's a graduate. She graduated high school a year early. And she was 14 credits behind, which really means she hadn't done any of high school before she killed her father. And she completed it a year early. She is starting college in the fall, in like 3 weeks, whenever her school starts. She's studying criminal justice, which is ironic, I guess. And she's just a gangly, gawky, nerd kid. And I love her very much. I met her when our community justice director said, hey, Deanne, you gotta meet this kid. She'll break your heart. I said, well, that's a pretty bad idea. And he said, no, I mean it. She'll break your heart. I was like, okay. And sure enough, he was right. She broke my heart, but I do love her. And she writes me letters that end with things like, the sun shines in the courtyard all day, and there's a koi pond. And I'm a vegetarian, and I get good food here. And so, but that's her life. And it's going to be for 25 years, because the law that was passed so hard by Representative Marsh and Senator Clough and the rest of the Oregon legislature and signed into law was not retroactive. But no kid going forward will receive the same kind of sentence, which is good and important. We have a lot of remarkable things that happen in our community thanks to the work of all of the people in this room and all of the people who live here, because we live in a remarkable community. Just last week, a local woman tagged me on a Facebook article and said, wow, look at this national article. People are stopping giving to charity and stopping volunteering. Oh my God, is that happening here? I said, no, it's not happening here. You can still go out of your house and do a good thing. There are plenty of places, and we're not running out of volunteers. But there are plenty of places and ways to engage. And I guess, without a doubt, everyone in this room does more than one great thing. And that's why we're able to be and do and solve the problems that we solve. United Way stands on those 4 impact areas with 4 pillars: that everyone should be housed, everyone should have food, everyone should be safe, and everyone should have health care. And that's the way we hope to achieve those goals. Thanks for having me today.
I'm going to join the gratitude train and thank you, David and Irene, for this incredible day and for our connection, which although we've only had one meeting, I know that it's the start of many. And thank you, Ambassador Chowdhury, for everything that you gave us in the morning that set us afoot. And Dr. Yang, you're hired. So I hope we'll all see you on the Oregon Shakespeare Festival stages soon. I wanted to start with quoting the incredibly wise words of the late, great Zelda Fitzhandler, who pioneered arena stage. And she talked about how theater foundationally should be two things. It should be a sanctuary in the best possible way, and it should be an exercise of empathy for everyone who is involved. These principles are what led me into the practice of theater. I was a high school student who was finding my way, who had at that point experienced a number of challenges, mental health challenges, bigotry and oppression in my neighborhood. I was molested. I was really insecure about what it meant to actually be a person and have value in my life. And encountering a theater class in high school is what changed it. And that theater class, going to see other theater companies and the way in which you described your visits to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, that is what gave me a sense of commitment and purpose in life and led me further. I think with that, when I look at what sanctuary holds with the theater or what it means to exercise empathy, I do think of the power of storytelling. I love what you spoke to with stories and the transformational quality of stories. In my job at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival as Director of Literary Development and Dramaturgy, have the incredible responsibility of working with the Artistic Director on planning the seasons that we hold, that we produce, and of commissioning writers to generate new material, to make their dreams actualized through plays, and then also to function as a dramaturg for productions, which is a hard thing to describe in a limited amount of time, but what I will say is dramaturgy for me captures how you understand the world that the play presents and how you constantly ask questions about the experiences of the characters in that world. And with all of that, I do feel that the transformational power of storytelling does allow us to find community, does allow us to understand stories through a sense of empathy, through connecting with characters, through the ability to see stories that we may not recognize in ourselves, but then find a point of view towards or a connection to. And it also, I think, can allow a sense of just the empowerment of what it means to see the representation on stage that you never thought could exist. I also will say I'm a deep advocate, as was shared across this panel and across others, in the power of joy as a form of resistance and the power of fun. And with that, I wanted to just share a brief history about a play that is currently on our stages. There's a play on our stages currently, Cambodian Rock Band by Lauren Yee. And yes, it deserves it. And Lauren began working on this play about 3.5 years ago, and I met it about 2 years into its journey. And it's a play that speaks to the intersectional, generational relationship between a father and a daughter. The father is a survivor of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, and the daughter has come back to Cambodia approximately 30 years later to seek justice on the Khmer Rouge leaders who essentially performed the genocide. And what is remarkable about that story, and remarkable about the way that Lauren tells it, and remarkable with the actors who perform it, is it tells the story of this incredibly tragic, chaotic, awful time that has so many roots of fact and truth in history, and speaks to how the survival of particularly the lead character is through his relationship to music and his belief that the music and his artistry could carry on and support the generation moving forward. So what you get to experience in this story is a literal rock concert that involves 15 songs, that involves celebration at the end. And it is absolutely a way in which you get to see the transformational power of storytelling. I witness constantly, every day in that theater, audiences that are laughing, that are cheering, that are moved to tears, and are dancing at the very end. I witness Khmer families who come together where the parents are able to take this play and have it be a way in which they can share their stories with their children, stories that have never been shared before. And to witness that through the act of a 2.5-hour performance is where stories matter, where you can see that. Another example that I wanted to share from last year, a production of a play to represent what we think of when we look at also the classics in the context of today. We produced a production of the musical classic Oklahoma, and the production of that musical was done with a representation that was LGBTQI. So we had a same-sex couple with Lori and Curly, both of whom were played by women, same-sex couple with Will and Ado Andy, both of whom were played by men, and a transgender actress who played Aunt Eller as a transgender character, as well as a number of different identity locations across the entire production. It was a vision of our former artistic director, Bill Rausch, a vision that he had held for about 30 years after seeing the musical Oklahoma and saying, as a gay man, I would love to see this musical represent all forms of love and for all forms of love to be understood and embraced. And when we produced this musical, I will admit that there was a lot of apprehension about how audiences would react. It's a musical that many found beloved in its original casting scheme, so it was something that the cast themselves admitted we are concerned about how audience members will react and how we will be taken care of in this process. And what continuously affirmed the value of that production is every single performance, and I think we had about 82 performances in total, there was always at least one student that came up to an actor and said, I never saw myself represented, and now I do. And now I either believe that I can be part of this theater field and can be honored with my identity, or I believe that I can love freely, and that is part of the journey that I can take. So I think of that, and particularly I think of that in concert with Oregon Shakespeare Festival's mission statement. It says, inspired by Shakespeare's work and the cultural richness of the United States, we reveal our collective humanity through illuminating interpretations of new and classic plays deepened by the kaleidoscope of rotating breadth. So constantly in my job, it is an exercise of how to actualize that vision with the stories that we tell, and how to recognize within the stories that we tell, how can we be more conscious of our own bias, of stories that we may have marginalized or not showcased on the stage that deserve to be told. Within the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, part of my work has also been with the different forms of equity groups that we've created within the company that look to how each of us as company members can better activate the values of stewardship, inclusion, diversity, and equity with everything that we do. So we operate truly as citizen artists. Within that, the company has formed a variety of different affinity groups, spaces where individuals who identify as people of color, as women, as people who are LGBTQI can find affinity and create a space where they can safely share with one another and also advocate towards the organization shifting its policies, shifting its procedures, so that we're constantly building that work. Just this past year, the organization worked with the company Arts Equity to implement training in equity, diversity, and inclusion principles for every single company member. So that's 600 company members who all have this training as part of their work. And having gone through the training twice, I will say what's so meaningful about it is the way in which you constantly consider yourself in process and the journey of what it means to look at the values that shape our humanity, what we believe is the utmost form of our humanity, and constantly look at the evolution of it. I also wanted to acknowledge and give a big shout out to Elizabeth Fairchild and Lucy Moore, who are part of our Members for Equity group, which is an incredible group of community members who came together to support these values with the festival and the programming of the festival. So we meet regularly, we talk about the plays, and they are consistently present in our members' lounge, across the bricks and different spaces, sharing that dialogue with audience members and sharing the intention of the writers and the directors and the actors so that there can always be that foundation in how we talk about the work. I will quote our former artistic director, Olivia Apple, who said, "An ideal season of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival is one where you do not like every play." That it has to actually be diverse enough that it can contain a holistic variety of tastes and desires. And as someone who was raised with the work of Shakespeare, who saw Shakespeare as a way in which I could connect to the world, I love that the festival honors Shakespeare both in his work, in his canon of work that continues, and in the ethos of Shakespeare as a revolutionary, raw playwright of his time who is generating new work for his society consistently. So with that, I want to just conclude with a quote by Agnes Boehmer in terms of how I hope the theater continues. I think that as a theater, there are steps that we are taking to look at how we reveal our collective humanity with our programming and with the work of the company, but also it is a constant evolution and experimentation, and we always have to do better. We are not a museum as theater, an antiquarian display. Theater is always a living art with open arms for the new. Yeah.
What's abundantly clear to me is that all of these people are in the right job. I expect most of us have had a love-hate relationship with experts. There are people who lorded their knowledge over us and made us feel inferior, told us what we should do. And there were wise mentors who shared from the heart their failures and their learnings and then helped illuminate the wisdom that was inside us. And I'd like to complete our panel today with an offer to the panelists and also to all of us, because I think you've earned our trust and our respect in what you've said and in the lives you've lived as you've revealed them to us, to ask for their advice. Why not? In other words, I'd love each of you, and we only have a couple of minutes, so we'll need to be brief, so give it a little thought while I ramble for another moment. One thing that you would give us as a suggestion of something to do. Okay? Not a story. Sorry, David. I love your stories. But one piece of advice, because I feel, and maybe I'm being presumptuous, that it's safe to speak for all of us that we really would like to know. I would like to know from these people I respect one thing that I could do to increase peace that I may not have thought of or may not be doing. So I'm going to be listening with bated breath. But while you all think of something, I'd just like to thank you each for one thing I feel you've contributed. David, your skinhead story, I'll never forget that. Making peace with people you disagree with, particularly agreements of the heart and soul, that's a life changer. That's a beautiful inspiration. Linda, the shift you made from teaching into administration, because you were motivated to bring positive change. She didn't stand on the outside and complain about what needed to happen. She jumped in, and then as she said, she fails every day. So do I. Isn't it wonderful just to admit that? I think that's part of leadership. And Sheila, you're identifying gaps in local well-being, pooling resources, and your use of the term well-being rather than health, and that it's linked to the prosperity of society. What a great connection to make, well-being and prosperity. David, I feel I've met
I'm Stephen.
Stephen, sorry. David. I know they're related. Stephen, I feel I've met a warrior brother. And I wrote down 3 or 4 times here on my notes the same word, because it kept coming up as you spoke, commitment. Here's a committed man. And I think that's inspirational for all of us who would like to see change and maybe haven't had the power that we've just experienced with Stephen. Deanne, I was really moved by your on-the-ground practical compassion. You didn't talk in meta terms at 3,000 feet. You talked about accompanying someone on the sidewalk at night because it wasn't safe. That inspires me to get a little more granular and real in my life. And where do I start with you, Amrita? Inspired, what you said about the power of joy and fun. You exemplify that, and something you said right at the end, wow, can I ever take this to heart? If this could be part of our mandate with the culture of peace, is to help foster a world where we all have the ability to love freely. What a world that would be. So, with the few minutes we have left, starting again with you, David, if you would give us one succinct suggestion of how we can improve peace, increase peace.
Great question. I think it would be engagement. It's really that advice. I just pledge to stay engaged. That it's very easy to make somebody an other. That every day when I get into a debate, suddenly part of my brain goes into making this person the other. Very easy to do. We're wired that way. But the dialogue is between the two hemispheres of the brain. And I just pledge to be part of that dialogue, the other. You meet somebody who's a Second Amendment person. You can't make that person the other without the dialogue. We're being protected today by an armed guard. Our synagogue will be protected on Yom Kippur by an armed guard. LGBTQI centers by armed guards. Black churches, armed guards. It's not the guns, but it's the dialogue that's so important in how to come to a solution and how to have gun regulation. So I think my only advice would be stay engaged in the dialogue. Keep fighting and keep arguing.
Great.
I've been struck, particularly in the last few days, by youth and what they're bringing to us. But I don't want us to cop out and put the weight of the work on them. So I think the advice to myself and to all of us would be, yes, let's listen to these young people. Let's be inspired by these young people and let that give us the determination and go back and do the work that we should be doing as the ones who have some power and some influence and some resources. We need to be seizing this opportunity, buoyed by their inspiration. And I want to leave you with some words that came from an 11th grader who participated in the camp that SOU does in the summer, the Conaway Nicotilicum camp for Native American youth. This 11th grader wrote, I am a motivated Native American who wants to lead my family out of oppression. I want to learn more about how to help Mother Earth and the people living off her. I'm working for a college diploma so the people can see I will have the solutions to our problems and lead by example for all my siblings. I want to help all my relations, the land, air, the creatures, the water. That inspires me, but it makes me think I need to work even harder.
I'll be very succinct. Service. Serve others. It's good for your heart.
Do what you can do, then you'll get a chance to do what you want to do. Want to know where I got that from? 2 seconds?
Yeah.
So when I was in my 20s, I worked with a gentleman that invented Nautilus equipment. His name was Arthur Jones. He passed a number of years ago. And I learned a lot of things. You want to talk about opposites in positions. Arthur made Attila the Hun look like a flaming liberal. Arthur, I told him when I left because he basically hated mankind. He used to tell me, people are scum. Never be so arrogant as to assume how stupid people really are. So, yes, I learned a lot from him because he was brilliant. I mean, he literally was brilliant. So one of the things he taught me in anything, it could be peace, it could be the business I went in, is do what you can do every day. What can you do? When you keep doing that, then you'll get a chance to do what you want to do.
Great.
So, right before he died, I got a chance to talk to him. I called him and said, hi, Arthur, it's Steve. And he had to remember for a moment. I said, how are you? And his response was, I'm waiting to die. So this was a gentleman where I basically said, I followed the things that I learned from you, and I stayed away from the things that I told you I would. I told him at 20-some years old, I'm leaving here because you're the reason God created Christianity. You believe, he used to say this, man is born in sin. And I said, I don't see people that way. I said, but the other side of it, Arthur, that was very practical of you, which kept me going, do what you can do. Then you get the opportunity to do what you want to do.
Great.
I had to tell the whole story, sorry.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
I challenge you in the next week, because I'm going to be very specific, to give an hour of yourself to someone.
Something that I'll hold for myself and share is commit to a positive act of change, no matter how small or large it may seem. I constantly engage with individuals on a daily basis who are surprised by the impact that they have. And we may never know that impact, but we can commit to that change.
Great.
I think my microphone is on. There we go. We're going to take a break in a few minutes that will be leading us into what I want to just let everybody know is we've been hearing from some wonderful people today. And next, what we're going to do is be inviting you to have conversations with each other and then sharing some of those conversations with the group at large about what has moved you and what advice you would have that you're going to implement in your life to be flames of peace. So as you walk into the next break, when that happens, please be giving that some thought. What has moved you about today? What has inspired you? And what is it that you're going to be doing to be flames of peace in your daily life? Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. So for our panel, appreciation. Good job.
Thank you.
And we'll take about a 10-minute break and then reassemble. Thank you.